Hello and welcome back. Today we are going to tackle the topic of reproduction, and we're going to focus this really on the different ways that organisms can reproduce. So humans go through sexual reproduction, but there are a number of different organisms and different ways to reproduce asexually. We're going to talk about that towards the end of this lecture. So to start, we're going to review mitosis. And you might be wondering why we're doing this, but it'll all make sense, so just stay with me. So, to start off with, mitosis produces identical body cells. So when mitosis happens, right, you divide a cell into two identical body cells. And those body cells are called somatic cells. Somatic just is the fancy scientific word for body cells. Now in humans, human cells contain 46 chromosomes. So when human body cells go through mitosis, the outcome is two identical somatic cells with 46 chromosomes. Now because there are 46 chromosomes, that means that they are diploid because we have two copies of each chromosome, right? We get one copy from mom and one copy from dad. So because we have two sets of chromosomes, two copies, that's called diploid, the di prefix meaning two. So two sets of chromosomes. So the human diploid number is 46. So if we were to have that number and we only looked at the chromosomes from mom, that would be 23, right? 23 is half of 46, so 23 chromosomes came from mom and 23 came from dad. Now when these chromosomes pair up, and you can see it right here, right? Same size, same genes, same location of genes, they are the same, it's just one's from dad and one's from mom. These two chromosomes together, they're called a homologous pair. So again, just the same genes, same traits, same order. Humans have 23 homologous pairs, right? Because we get 23 from mom and 23 from dad, and if I have 23 pairs of something, that means I have 46 total, right? 23 pairs is 46 total. So it's all coming together, right? Mitosis, identical. That's the key here. But let's introduce you to a new word that sounds very similar but is very different. Meiosis. Because of course, science names things like this, right? So, meiosis. What is it? What does it do? Why does it occur? What's happening? So meiosis is the production of sex cells. So when a cell goes through meiosis, it reduces the usual number of chromosomes by half. So if in a normal human cell, I have 46 chromosomes, after my cells go through meiosis, I'm going to have half of that number, or 23. It does this because it's producing gametes, or sex cells. And in humans, a gamete would be a sperm cell or an egg cell. These haploid, meaning one set of chromosomes, haploid gametes have to only have 23 chromosomes because when they come together, right, when a sperm and an egg cell come together, then you add 23 and 23 and you get 46. If they started out with 46 already when they came together, then you would have 92, and that's just too many chromosomes, right? So the reason for this is that gametes only have one copy of each homologous pair because an egg cell and a sperm cell will join, right, during fertilization. And once they join, then you get that diploid number, right? That 46, that 2n number. But if they started with that 2n number, then it would just be way too many chromosomes. So meiosis is the process of reducing chromosomes by half to produce sex cells. So the basics of meiosis. We're not going to go too in depth with the process because you've already sort of learned it through mitosis. So when we learned about mitosis, we learned about the four stages, right? Prophase, metaphase, anaphase, and telophase. Meiosis does the same thing. I'm not trying to trick you here. Meiosis goes through the same thing as mitosis, right? It goes through prophase, metaphase, anaphase, and telophase, except it has to go through it twice. So the first step of meiosis is identical to mitosis. But then meiosis does all of those steps again. It goes through prophase, metaphase, anaphase, and telophase a second time. And at the end of the second division, you end up with half of the number of chromosomes than you started with. So it needs those 2 divisions to get to the chromosome number that we're looking for. Now during prophase, this only happens during meiosis, but during prophase, this idea of crossing over can occur. And what crossing over is when you are literally crossing over sections of chromosomes and they like pair up with each other and they exchange genetic information so that the offspring have a little bit more genetic variation. And that's super important. Genetic variation is how you keep species going, sort of. The more genetic variation you have, the healthier the species overall will be. If everybody was exactly the same and there was no genetic variation, then it's very easy for like a disease to come through and wipe everything out, because there's no option, there's no like alternative option for like protecting yourself. But genetic variation does give you that option of having just a little bit of a difference between all humans or, you know, all dogs, something like that, just to lead to this variation to better protect the species as a whole. Now let's talk about the comparing and contrasting mitosis versus meiosis. We've talked about both of these. Meiosis we're not going to get super into, but you should know the basics, right? So the type of reproduction, because mitosis makes identical cells and there's only one parent, that's considered asexual reproduction. In meiosis, because there's an egg and a sperm cell, that means 2 different parents, it's sexual reproduction. There's only one division in mitosis and it makes 2 identical daughter cells. In meiosis, there's 2 divisions, it makes 4 cells, and each of the cells, because of that genetic variation we just talked about, is unique, right? No 2 cells are the same in meiosis. In mitosis, it's diploid. The outcome are diploid somatic cells. So they have 2 sets of chromosomes and they're body cells. In meiosis, they are haploid gametes. So they have 1 set of chromosomes and they are sex cells. And then for genetic variation, mitosis doesn't increase it, but meiosis does. Now we talked at the beginning of this that we were going to just briefly go over a few types of asexual reproduction, and these are the 6 types we're going to focus on. Now, asexual reproduction as a whole is a process in which one parent produces 1 or more identical offspring. This is the key point, though, is that it's one parent. So asexual reproduction produces clones, identical offspring, and they can do this in a number of ways. Mitosis, which is what we've just been talking about this whole time, but mitosis is the equal division of DNA and cytoplasm in eukaryotic cells. So this is literally like making an identical copy of a eukaryotic cell. Binary fission is that same idea, an equal division of DNA and cytoplasm, except in prokaryotic cells, like bacteria. Okay, so mitosis and binary fission are almost identical, it's just the type of cells it happens in. Sporulation is the production of a single-celled diploid spore that can grow into an adult. So like think molds, some fungi produce spores, and then so an adult produces a spore, and then that spore just like gets taken off with like wind or through an animal or something, and it lands and it grows an identical adult, can grow into an identical adult just from that single spore. Vegetative propagation is when you take like a cutting from a plant, like you replant a plant leaf, and it will grow into an identical plant. So you can make a clone like that. Regeneration is the reproduction of lost or damaged parts. Like if a starfish loses its arm, it can actually just regrow that arm, or like earthworms can do this too. And then budding is the equal division of DNA, but unequal division of cytoplasm. So this would be like, you see this in yeast sometimes. well, not sometimes, always, yeast reproduces by budding. And like it'll have like a little growth start to form, and so like the DNA is there, but you don't get all of that cytoplasm, and then eventually it'll just sort of like pinch off from the parent, and then it will grow into the regular size, but it starts off as an unequal division of that cytoplasm. And then our very last slide is just to overview sexual reproduction, right? So we start with our gametes that are produced via meiosis. We have an egg, which is the female gamete, and a sperm, which is the male gamete, and they join together to form a new, unique offspring. When the male and female gametes unite, that's supposed to say unite, fertilization takes place, and the fertilized egg is called a zygote. So when egg and sperm meet, that's called fertilization. When you actually create a fertilized egg, it is no longer called a fertilized egg, it is now called a zygote. The new offspring is not identical to either parent, but rather a unique mix of characteristics from both parents. This is why you do not look identical to your parents, but you probably look similar, right? You're still working with the same traits that they are, but it's a mix of both mom and dad. So sexual reproduction allows for variation in the population and a better chance at survival. So the more variation a population has, the better chance they will survive. All right, great job, and I will see you in class.